appreciate y'all allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Joe Average Boomer, and tonight I'm going to answer the question that might be on some of you's mind, and that is, who is Joe Average Boomer? And why? So, first I think we need to talk about demographics, and I'm going to give a little mini lesson in demographics from a book that I read several years ago. And the book that really caught my interest was a book called The Great Boom Ahead that was written in the early 90s by a man named Harry S. Dent. And Harry Dent is runs a consulting firm, I guess you could call it, or a small company that does meta-analysis on economic trends. So he studies the demographics of the population of originally just the U.S., but now he covers the world. And there were some very interesting things about the generations that come along. And I was interested in this because of the economic conclusions that he draws, but the background that he gave was very, very interesting. And a lot of the economy today, and for the past 40, 50 years, has been triggered in large part to the existence of the baby boom. Now, the baby boom, or the baby boomers, are defined as people that were born between 1946, the very end of World War II, and 1964, which is a pretty broad range. That's 18 years, that's a big gap. But those people represent the largest generation ever in the history of the U.S. And it's still the largest generation today. And this huge generation has had a huge impact on the economy in the U.S. as they age. And as the generation ages, different effects come and go and come and go. And I was looking at these statistics one day, and I figured out that I was born almost right in the middle of that generation. And I looked at some statistics about height and weight, and I was like, man, I really am. I'm an average boomer. I'm pretty darn close to being the average age, weight, and size. So I was, well, I kind of like that. I thought I'll use that for food for thought one of these days. But prior to that, I want to talk a little more about these generations. There was the Bob Hope generation, which was our parents, another large generation. That's the generation that survived the Depression, the Roaring '20s, which was like party land, the Depression of the late 20s and 30s, really all the way through the 30s. Then, when World War II started, or the United States decided to get involved in World War II, the United States turned on an economic engine that was nothing like the world had ever seen. The countries in Europe that were having this war were buying military hardware from us as fast as we can build it. And the industrial production machine, that had really started with Henry Ford and the Model T, but that industrial production machine cranked into full gear, full tilt. The people in our economy went to full tilt. Most of the men, young men anyway, wound up going to war, and these car factories, for example, were turned into airplane factories and ran almost exclusively by women. There was one that I saw that cranked out 1,000 planes a year of the bomber. I think it was the B-52 bomber that was used, on a wide scale during World War II. So that was the Bob Hope generation. That generation was very conservative, very command and control, organizational hierarchy type of a generation. At the end of World War II, our industrial production complex was so massive and so geared so high that when all of these soldiers come back from Army and we came back victorious, we were in a great condition, a great economic state, and that spurred fantastic economic times, and that military machine turned into commercial uses. So during this period, that combination of all these people being at war, coming home from war, and then to great economic activity resulted in a lot of babies getting born. And that's where they all come from. So, but, like they also point out in generational shifts like this, every other generation, you have a very conservative generation, and then you have the next generation is usually kind of a rebellious generation. And certainly the baby boomers turned out to be a very rebellious generation, excuse me. So I was caught up in that. I grew up in all of that, grew up through the 60s, through the 70s, and the skyrocketing oil prices, the crazy 60s. The 70s, the 80s, which were quite, kind of like the 20s, are really quite nice. And now, as we grow older, you know, we get to a point where we want to pass on lessons to the younger generation. And that's kind of what I want to try to do with this Joe Average Boomer. Now, why Joe Average Boomer? Most people that see this are going to know me. They're going to say, Charlie, why don't you just use your real name? And the reason is, there's a couple of good reasons. One is, in the Batman movie, it was in 2008, after Batman, they beat the Joker, the Batman took the blame for what the Joker had done to Gotham, so that people could blame Batman instead of blaming the Joker. They couldn't blame Bruce Wayne. And another line that I'd like to quote, in the 70s, there was a detective show called Dragnet. And the famous line on Dragnet were, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. Well, I kind of want to use Joe Average Boomer to change the names and protect the guilty. And also, by using an alias, by using another name, that almost gives me kind of like license to not necessarily tell the whole truth. Some of the stories might be embellished a little bit. A lot of it will be based on fact, but it's also kind of a thing that attorneys call plausible deniability. I could say, that was Joe Average Boomer's idea. He's the one that came up with that. And I used that the other day. I was talking to a girl that works in our office, and I was telling her about some of the topics I was contemplating. And she said, how do you come up with these ideas? I said, I didn't come up with it. Joe Average Boomer came up with it. So my mission is to use this method of communication to try to pass down wisdom to younger generations about the school hard knocks that I've been through, the good times I've had, the bad times I've had, and just general principles or lessons of life. Hopefully I can do it in an educational way, and hopefully I can do it in an entertaining way. That's the purpose. That's who Joe Average Boomer is. Thank you very much.